Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Sarah Stevenson and I am a Development Officer currently seconded to the Early Careers team, and I'll just let my colleague Cecilia introduce herself.
Hi everyone, I'm Cecilia Nunn and I'm working with Sarah, work in the Early Careers team and deal with a lot of the probationer queries and setting the profiles up, so here to help.
This afternoon we are exploring about supporting a flexible route probationer in school. So we're going to go through some of the intricacies of the flexible route with you. Cecilia and myself and my colleague Rachel are the ones that man our PLD email box. So if ever you need to email in and ask any questions, then it'll be one of us three that come back to you. So hopefully this will be new information for you. For some of you it might be a refresher, but please feel free to ask any questions through the chat function and Cecilia will do her best to try and answer those as we go, but if not, as Kirsty's pointed out, we'll have a question and answer session at the end. Okay, so we have lots of different routes that we'll explore throughout this presentation of why or why teachers might be on the flexible route to probation. If you think about the teacher induction scheme, there are two routes when you come out of university, immediately out of university, and one of those is to join the teacher induction scheme, which is government funded and takes 190 days to complete full-time in one school. Alternatively, there are teachers that opt to gain their full registration via the flexible route, which is what we're looking at this afternoon. That commonly takes 270 days, although there are differences as we'll explore as we go through the presentation this afternoon. So the key principles of the flexible route are that teachers can be employed by a local authority or independent schools as your employers. Okay, they can choose their own local authority and can choose to work part-time, which is why this particular route suits some people who have responsibilities at home that they need to work around their probation route. It takes typically 270 days, which is about a year and a half, with a time limit of 3 to 5 years. But that time limit is actually more than the teacher induction scheme, which is 3 years. And that's really in recognition that for some people, they might be achieving full registration via the flexible route on supply, and it might take a little bit longer to reach those 270 days of satisfactory teaching. There is one exception within the flexible route, and that is if a teacher is working full-time in one school continuously, the probationer can then request recommendation for full registration after 190 days, just as they would on the teacher induction scheme. One of the big differences compared to the teacher induction scheme with the flexible route is that there is no guaranteed work, in as much the TIS placements are all allocated and government funded, whereas flexible route positions are not. Teachers are expected to find their own work via just the normal application process or via supply. Also, there is no entitlement to support, as there is with the supporters scheme in the teacher induction scheme. However, we do find that by and large, most schools would prefer to give support to flexible route probationers. Whichever route a probationer takes, whether it's the teacher induction scheme or the flexible route, they're still working towards meeting the standard for full registration in all areas to be able to gain their full registration. So it's not that one route is particularly better than another, it's just flexible on this route. In as much as it gives people that flexibility to work where they choose and in a time that suits them and suits their family commitments. Okay, so as we said, no matter which route to probation a teacher is taking, they must still meet the standard for full registration, which we call the SFRS, the standard for full registration. If you are unfamiliar with the content of the standard for full registration, you can access a downloadable copy of those either on the Interteaching website or on our main website, which is www.gtcs.org.uk. One thing to point out is currently they're working in the current set of standards for full registration. However, there will be a refreshed set of standards that everybody will be working towards this time next year, so August 2021. So it's important to note that this year still working within the current documentation that's on our website, but next year that will change. So, who are flexible route probationers? Well, flexible route probationers, as we've talked about already, are probationers that have come to the flexible route for many different reasons. For some of them, they have chosen this right from the point of registration with us from university. Some of them have decided that they weren't able to take up their TIS allocated place and have effectively withdrawn from the TIS scheme, but are pursuing the flexible route. Also, as we'll explore a little bit further into the presentation, we also have teachers that have qualified outside of Scotland. So they are registered teachers in their own country of origin. However, they are required through our registration processes to complete a set number of days, and that it very much depends on their experience prior to coming to Scotland. And the other group of teachers who will be following the flexible route as such are those who are adding an additional qualification or additional subject to their teaching profile. So there are different routes of the profile, and we're going to explore these with Cecilia's help very shortly. So mostly teachers will be online. However, some you will find have to do a paper copy of their profile. So we'll just go on to explore those now. And I'm going to hand over to Cecilia, who will explain the online profile.
Okay, so here you'll see a screenshot of the online profile system that we're moving over to. Currently it's still in a bit of a pilot system, so there is a few things that you'll notice will change on the live system. It's just to improve the user friendliness of the system. So to start with, you can see that it clearly states the profiles. So if they are dual qualified, it'll give them a profile for both subjects. This will also imply if they later on add an additional subject, that'll just get added onto the profile section, and they'll be able to switch between the profiles there, like you can see in the top right hand corner there. Further down the page, it's got their profile progress, so this will keep an up-to-date live version of how many days they're required. So most of them, like Sarah mentioned, will start off with the 270 days, but depending on whether they've qualified outside of Scotland with previous experience, or whether they've maybe moved from the induction scheme and gathered a few days, it may be less than that. As the days start to get recorded, which I'll touch on in just a moment on how to do so, their teaching days completed will start to go up and the days required will start to go down, and they'll just get a clear understanding of how many days they've got remaining before they can submit for registration. Just to the side of that, you'll see there that it's got the option to share their profile. So the probationers can, when they start in a school, share the profile with a supporter, with the head teacher, anyone really within the school that's maybe overviewing them, doing observations and things like that. They can share the entire profile so you can see any previous service, what they've done so far. and things like that. Each section as well of the profile can be shared individually, so if you just want to see maybe their observations, they can share just that one section with you as well. And you'll see just underneath that the submit for recommendation, that's greyed out until they've met all the criteria and everything's been met and everything's been signed off. That then will become a live link so that they can submit that to the school to submit. Then you go into each section, so we've tried to make it as similar to the induction scheme profiles as possible, but allowing that flexibility. So you'll see there they've got the initial development action plan. So if they have come from a Scottish university, they'll have likely done an ITE profile with the university, which will then get transferred and pulled over to their IT profile, and then the probationer and the school supporter can go over that with them and see that. If they have qualified outside of Scotland or possibly not undertook an IT profile and don't have that initial action plan, they can just sit down with the supporter within the school, or even themselves if they're aware of sort of action plan and development needs that they're aware of, just putting together an action plan to start that progress. And we usually advise 2 in each of the 3 sections to begin with. You've then got the record of service page. That's where they'll just record any service they do in your school, any other schools. They can record it in terribly blocks, supply days here and there, and also if they're doing 190 days in one school full time, they can record it as if in a termly contract as well. It's also got an option to record the support meetings and observations, so they would just add them in as they go along and submit them and sign them off as they've entered them and recorded them. Support meetings are not a requirement for the flexible route probationers. Sorry, I'm just going to take a drink. So support meetings aren't a requirement for the flexible route probationers, but if they do have any, you can record them. They can get shared with the school as well. You can see any previous ones. So it does just give them that option to record it if necessary. And then you've got the CPD section. So we advise if they can complete up to 9 records within the probation period minimum to be able to submit the profile. They would just record it in there and again submit that to yourselves or share it if they've done service in other schools as well, so you can see that. You've then got the key strengths and development areas. So once they've shared the profile with you, you will be able to action that at any point. So you can go in and just add in any key strengths and development areas throughout the entire probation period. It'll be an active link for you to go in and add that information. If it hasn't been recorded after 45 days that a probationer has been within the school, you will get alerted to be able to action that, just to notify it needs to be completed. And then last of all, you've got the professional development action plan, which is sort of the final action plan when they come to sort of finishing probation and submitting for that recommendation for full. And it's similar to that where they would just record 2 in each of the 3 sections and submit that to their supporter while working with them to record that. And once they've filled out all of the sections and they've all been signed off, the link will appear like I mentioned before, and they would submit the profile and sign off.
Cecilia, I wonder if you could just mention the observed teaching requirements for the flexible route as well. I wonder if you could go over those, because they vary slightly, don't they?
Yeah, sorry if I missed that part. So for the observations on the flexible route, it can be a bit different depending on what route they have come in. What we tend to advise is a minimum of 6 observations throughout the entire probation period. So that is a minimum we start off with. If they are working in sort of a number of different schools and sort of doing short supply here and there, we do tend to advise them to seek an observation for every 20 days, just to allow them to get that bit of extra support if they are moving from school to school. If they have came in from outside of Scotland and they've had a reduced probation period for if they've had previous service, etc., we will sort of look at the days remaining and go on the observations from that. So for example, if they had 135 days remaining after done previous service, we may only ask for around 3 or 4 observations. Each profile will be sort of reflecting on the criteria for that probationer. So if they are qualified outside of Scotland with minimum days, it will show underneath that tab for them exactly how many observations required.
Okay, so I'm going to move on to the paper-based profiles, which is just ever so slightly different. And again, Cecilia, I can hand over to you. Thank you.
That's great, Sarah. So the paper-based profiles, we are trying to move away from them as much as possible, and we are hoping, obviously, in the near future that we will hopefully be able to get everything on the online profile, so that we can use that facility. However, if you are teaching outside of Scotland for whatever reason, we get probationers that possibly live in England, have a probation period in Scotland to complete. And also we do accept other places abroad, so as long as they follow a similar curriculum to the Scottish one and teaching in the medium of English and within their subject, we can consider service that they have done outside of Scotland. So when they do service outside of Scotland, they would need to complete a paper-based form, as the online profile doesn't accept that. So they would be able to find that on our Into Teaching website, and it's exactly the same as the online profiles, just in a paper-based form. They would be given the sections to observe, to record their observed teaching, to record their supporter meetings, the records of service, and the IPDAP and PDAP. It's all just recorded on a Word document, or it can be printed out and written in, and you would either just scan and print that, scan or post it to the GTCS, and we would then assess that and update any records accordingly. Just to note on that as well, we do tend to advise anybody doing the paper report starting off with to continue on otherwise, unless we've told to by the GTCS. So if they've been in touch with us and we've notified them to then move on to an online profile after using paper-based, that's great. If they haven't been notified by the GTCS after using the paper reports, just get in contact with us. We can sort their online profile out to move on to that, or they can just remain on the paper-based profiles, and we can update them from there as well.
Thanks, Cecilia. It's probably worth mentioning as well, at the moment, our access to our office is very limited, and in terms of picking up postage. So if you have got anybody in school that you're supporting that is on a paper-based profile and just coming up to the final report, it's actually more advisable to scan the records in and send them to PLD at this moment in time. Obviously, if that changes, we'll let you know, but at the moment, it's probably easier just to scan and send those in. Anything else we need to cover on the report, Cecilia?
I think that covers the basis on the reports. Obviously, if you have any questions, you can get in touch with us, but they are similar to the online profile, like they are on the paper reports. And we will be issuing out guidance on each individual section on how to complete that for the online facility. So hopefully that will help as well in completing the forms.
And just another note, some of you may have new probationers that have just started, and they'll be identifiable with their 6-digit registration number. It'll be a 20 number. Their online flexible route profiles will be coming live to them this week. If not already today, it's going to be today or tomorrow that they will get registration information in how to sign in and access their online profiles. So those should be up and running by the end of the week. We're trying to get, as Cecilia said, as many people onto the online system as possible. And I'll touch a little bit towards the end on some extra support that we're going to be giving in terms of the profiles as well. Okay. So in terms of time limits, we mentioned at the beginning that there were differences in the teacher induction scheme and the flexible route in terms of time limit. So the teacher induction scheme, you have 3 years to complete, and the flexible route, 5 years to complete. The one difference in that is that if somebody is in your school that has withdrawn from the teacher induction scheme and then gone on to the flexible route, they are still subject to a 3-year time limit. So if they've started on the flexible route, it's 5 years. If they've come from the teacher induction scheme because they've withdrawn from the teacher induction scheme, they are still subject to 3 years, and that is from the point of being given provisional registration. The observations, I think, Cecilia, you've touched on those already in the profile. Just in as much as that you would provide observations in school for other colleagues and other teachers. We do have some downloadable observation schedules that will be of use to you, and you can find those on the Interteaching website. Similarly, we have a pro forma for supporters meetings if you're offering those to your flexible route probationer as well. So all of those are available. You don't have to use those schedules that we've put together. You can use something in-house that you already have, but rather than reinvent the wheel, if you're looking for something to be able to do that, then we have those available. Timetable, I wonder, Cecilia, could I pass back to you in terms of timetables?
Yep, so on the flexible route, unlike the teacher induction scheme, there is no sort of reduced timetable or maximum timetable that they need to complete. They can work as little part-time, or they can work a full timetable on the flexible route as a normal teacher would. On the flexible route, to make it sort of simple, if they started off with the 270 days, like most probationers will, they can have up to 45% of their probation period. So of that 270 days, they can have 121 days classed in another area or subject. So you may find this if they're a primary teacher and they do some experience within a nursery setting, that can count towards that 45% if they're contracted as a teacher. You may also find some probationers might work in the additional support needs sector. Again, if that's not their area of registration, that can count under that 45% towards the probation period. That 55% does need to be in a mainstream setting, teaching the area of registration. So again, if it's primary, it needs to be in that primary age range, teaching the whole curriculum. And if it's in the secondary, they would need to be teaching their subject for 55%. That can be split in the timetable. So if you're doing the 55% of a week's timetable, that would cover that over the amount of time, and 45% can be made up of cover classes and things like that.
And thanks, Cecilia. And in recognition that every single flexible route probationer will have a very individual set of circumstances and requirements, if at all you're unsure about the timetabling requirements for the probationer in your school, please do just drop us a line at PLD, and we'll be more than happy to clear up exactly what the requirements are. If you're in any doubt, please just do ask. So when you're making your final recommendation, you are making a recommendation of satisfactory or unsatisfactory. Okay, so satisfactory is that they've met the standards for full registration in all areas. Satisfactory that there still requires some work to be done. Cecilia, are you able to explain the scenario if somebody is given an unsatisfactory on the flexible route?
Yep, so on the flexible route, to start off with, any unsatisfactory days that they are, so that they get signed off, if they get signed off with unsatisfactory, the days don't get credited towards the initial 270 days being completed. So they do need to work back those days as being satisfactory. And they may complete the full 270 days after having some unsatisfactory service throughout that. Once they've finally completed the probation period of satisfactory service, the final recommendation would then be for full registration, extension or cancellation. So you would be able to still recommend for an extension if you felt that they needed a slightly longer period. Again, any unsatisfactory service wouldn't be credited, only the satisfactory days. Or you can request for a cancellation if you felt that it was at that point of registration. Alternatively, it will be full registration and they would get full registration off the back of that recommendation.
Thank you. Okay, so qualified outside of Scotland, as we've mentioned, it is possible that there will be teachers that are registered teachers in their own home country, and they are registering for full registration here in Scotland. So they will be given by our registration department. Within our registration department, we have a qualified outside of Scotland team, and they will be given a certain number of days that they are required to complete on the flexible route. Okay. Sometimes we find that we have qualified outside of Scotland teachers come to us via agencies, and they may not be overly clear on the fact that they need to go and complete the flexible route profile. So if you have anybody in your school in that situation who is a little bit unclear about what their requirements are in terms of fulfilling their days on the flexible route, then please do ask them to drop us a line. But generally speaking, the registration team will have a look at the previous experience of the teacher who has qualified outside Scotland, and they will recommend the number of days that they have to do in their subject. And as Cecilia said, bearing in mind in the mix then the requirements of the percentages of the timetable would still apply to those qualified outside Scotland. Yeah. Anything else, Cecilia, about qualified outside Scotland that you'd like to add in there?
I think you've covered it there. Just bear in mind that they can have, honestly, from 60 to the 270 days. So just get in touch if you have any queries about their requirements.
Okay. And then, Cecilia, I wonder if you might cover registration in a second subject, because again, this can be slightly confusing for some people. So if we could just clarify how people come to us with registration in the main subject and wanting to add in another one, that would be really helpful.
Yep, so so as a teacher, once they've got full registration, they can apply for an additional subject, or in some occasions they may actually come onto our register with 2 subjects and get full registration in their first. So they would be then working on the registration in their additional area of registration. For that probation period, it's reduced to 135 days, and that's solely if they are doing an additional area of registration, so they have to have that full registration in the first subject. We then allow a 135 days probation period, or 95 if it's in one school full time. We look for around 20% or more of their timetable for that week to be in the area of registration that they're doing a probation period for. So as long as 20% of the timetable for that week covers that, we can credit all those days towards their probation period. At the moment, we are using paper-based forms for the majority of additional support, for the majority of people doing additional registration, but we are looking to get that on the online profile, like I showed in the first sort of screenshot there with the profile links. So they may be using the paper form to do that, which is fine. We can still process that in the meantime. They may also have the online profile, which they're using for that as well, and that's also fine. But it would be that reduced probation period, which is just to keep an eye on, make sure it doesn't get muddled up with anyone qualified outside of Scotland.
Thank you. Okay, so in terms of support, in the early careers team, we are going to be launching shortly a virtual school for flexible route probationers, and this will be a space where they are able to move between the 3 kind of key stages to gaining full registration. So there's the initial getting set up and coming from from whichever route they're coming into the flexible route from, getting their registration set up, getting them set up with their profiles and their initial registration fees, making sure that they're ready and completely passed all the necessary with Disclosure Scotland, all that sort of thing. So that's the first stage. Then the middle stage is obviously when they are gaining service and recording that service through the profiles. And then we move to the third stage, which is where they're nearing the end of their probationary period, and we look forward to the support that they require as they move towards full registration and moving into the system of professional update. So within the virtual school space, there's going to be a lot of help, guidance, professional learning that will be provided through that space for them. Also, we're hoping to link in with the flexible route page on the Into Teaching website as well, so that you'll be able to access all of the content that will be up there. We are very much recognising that it can be quite tricky for flexible route probationers, particularly at this time in some areas of the country, and we wanted to be able to provide a level of support to them should they not be able to access any teaching placements, or they're not fortunate enough to have supporters like yourselves in school where they can go and ask questions about their profile and things. So we're going to be providing this support hub that you'll get to hear more about, called the Virtual School, and all being well, we'll try and pop in a webinar with a walkthrough for the Virtual School later on this year. Okay, we're doing fine for time, so I wonder if there have been any questions, and we might like to get Kirsty to come and help us with this one. Are you there, Kirsty?
Yeah, so we've had a couple of questions, and if anyone's got any just now, you can just pop them in the question box. So I think there's one that Cecilia's already covered, and that's a document with all of the minimum requirements for each section for the profile, so that will be made available quite soon.
Yeah, we'll have guidance and sort of confirmation on the basic requirements for each of the sections, and that will all be available, and all be available for the supporters, probationers, and on the virtual schools.
Great. A couple of people have asked for clarification just on how often the key strengths and next steps need to be completed. Is it done every 45 days? Is there a limit on that?
Okay, so for the key strengths and development areas, it can be entered at any point during their probation period. However, after 45 days, if there hasn't been any actions been put in, an alert will get popped up and ask for that information. So really, it's after 45 days within a school that information is requested. But if you are just popping in and updating that as you go along with the probationer, that will be sufficient enough, yeah.
Yeah, we've got some great questions coming in now. What are the expectations on local authorities to provide professional learning for flexible route probationers?
So the local authority and the school are not sort of under an expectation to provide to not necessarily provide that for the flexible route probationers. However, a lot of local authorities and schools do offer the same sessions for the teacher induction scheme that they do for the flexible route probationers as well. So they're often invited along to that, and they can use that towards their professional learning records. For the probationers, we ask for at least 9 records of professional learning to be entered across the probation period in order to get full registration, and that can go from personal, from school to local authority. So we try and strongly advise they get a mixture of all 3, but really as much as they can get their hands on, that's the best, yeah.
And also we've got information on the Into Teaching website in the flexible route section and in the teacher induction scheme of the local authority probation managers. the names for each local authority, but also on our main GTCS website as well. There's really helpful information about what constitutes professional learning, and sometimes it's just getting away from that idea that it has to be a course, because it absolutely doesn't. There's lots of different means to gaining professional learning, as all of you listening will know. So it's maybe about looking at some of those different options with your probationer that you have in school, and exploring anything that's available locally as well.
Yeah, just lots of questions coming in now. I think someone's just looking to repeat whether we said one should include 2 areas from each of the 3 standard for registration areas when filling in the initial and final professional development action plans.
Yeah, so in both the initial development action plan and the professional development action plan, there's the 3 sections there of the standards that we would like them to meet. What we would just ask is that they record 2 action points in each of the 3 sections for their action plan. So that can sort of range from what you feel is best for that probationer. But if they can try and meet that 2 in each of the three standards there, that would be perfect for them submitting that.
So another question about after school. Can after school activities for probationary hours be counted if these are taught by a probationer?
So as far as I'm aware, after school activities wouldn't be credited towards the days. It would have to be sort of in school doing the full curriculum in sort of teaching hours at the moment. As far as I'm aware, I don't think due to circumstances that's changing, but what they can do is use that experience towards professional learning. So although it's not going towards the days, it can build up the professional learning in that sense, yeah.
A couple more on the profiles. So what happens if an NQT has one of the old online flexible route profiles? Will this information be transferred over, and are local authorities able to see these flexible route probationers in their authority? So will they be aware?
Okay, so yes, there is still a couple probationers on the older version of the profile. For the moment, that's still accessible for the supporters and for the school to see. They would just access that through the link you'll receive in an email to sign that off. Eventually, we will be pulling all the information through to the new profile system. Correspondence will go out for that just to alert you on how that's going to work, as also to the probationers on what's going to get pulled through. So we will have that underhand when that gets moved across. In the meantime, the school and the local authority can access both profile systems through that link to access that.
It's also worth noting that on the 29th of October, Cecilia and I are going to hold another webinar specifically on the online profile and the different paper-based profiles that are available. So if you do have a flexible route probationer in your school at that time, it might be worth encouraging them in professional learning to sign up for the webinar on the 29th of October, because then they'll be able to get we're hoping, if the technology will let us, aren't we, Cecilia, a live walk through the profile. So I know that 29th of October seems quite a way away, but we just felt that by the time we got everybody up and running with their online profiles, and then the October holidays were kicking in, it was probably best to just wait until after the October holidays. So we've scheduled that in as soon as possible after all the different holiday schedules around the country. So that's the 29th of October.
We have a couple of questions related to qualifying outside of Scotland. So if someone from outside of Scotland completes their PDGE within Scotland, what routes are they eligible for?
It does depend on what with the university. So the university are ultimately the ones to confirm with us if they're eligible for the induction scheme or if they're not eligible. Usually, if they do complete a PGDE in Scotland through a Scottish university, they're likely to be eligible for the induction scheme, but it does depend on funding and sort of eligibility like that with the university as well.
And someone is asking during the registration process they hadn't submitted their teaching experience outside of the UK, and can this be submitted midway through the probation year?
Yep, so all they would need to do, because it is outside of Scotland, is complete that paper-based report. It would be the interim report if they haven't quite finished their probation yet, and they would send that in to us either by post or scanning it, preferably at the moment. And what we'll do is, if they've got an online profile as well, because it's midway through, we'll update the online profile to reflect that service being credited.
So any adjustments that are required in terms of days at any point along the way for a probationer, whether it's that they've been in your school for the 190 days, the full year, and then they're able to claim their full registration after 190 days, all of that is manually done in the background by the PLD team. So you'd need to get in touch with us to get those changes made for you.
Yeah, and just I think this is one last one on the outside of Scotland. Is there a way to gain information about individual requirements for probationers qualified outside of Scotland, such as how many days, any requests for essays or research tasks?
So the registration department have the online, the qualified outside Scotland team, and they, when a teacher comes to register with us, they look at their experience and everything, and they will determine how many days are required. So it's very difficult for us to say that it's one number fits all, because it doesn't. It very much depends on each individual circumstances. The teacher themselves, at the point of registration, provisional registration being granted, they will be provided with a communication from us that will explicitly set out how many days are required for them. So they should be able to share that information with you, and it'll also be detailed in their profile.
If a registered secondary teacher is seeking professional registration in primary, is it 135 days as a flexible route probationer?
Yes, it is 135 days, and just to note that if it is a cross-sector additional subject, we wouldn't sort of apply that 20% rule. We would expect the full 135 days to be in that sector in their area of registration. So the full 135 days would be in primary in that case.
But we do have a few more questions. It should only take another maybe 5 minutes, hopefully.
Okay.
So if everyone's okay to sort of hang around a little bit, just to do that. So does a flexible route probationer need to have the full week of lessons? Need to have a full week of lessons for the 190 days to qualify? If only 55% class commitment and then cover classes, can they teach the requirement to finish early?
Cecilia, do you want to say that?
Yeah, so the 190 days, so in the 190 days, if they're doing 55% of the timetable in the area of registration, and the further 45% is doing cover classes, that's fine. It just does need to be that full time in the one school, teaching at least 55% in the area of registration.
Great. So this person supports a part-time probationer who started last December, and is asking if this person will have a reduced number of days to complete as she was working through lockdown. And you know, obviously that was with we made some adjustments to that, so would this still apply this year?
So the adjustments to the flexible route days for lockdown. So we've advised that if, so for example, they had 270 days, that 70-day period where schools were closed, if they were still contracted and being paid as a teacher during that period, and doing either online teaching or professional learning, then they can record that service on their online profile and have it credited like previous service they've done as well. For that lockdown period, that's the only period we would accept working from home. It would still be the full 270, but we would just be sort of having that flexibility with 200 days in the class, with the 70 days being able to work from home.
And obviously, at the moment, you know, it's been very closely monitored in conjunction with colleagues at Scottish Government and Education Scotland and ourselves. There are weekly monitoring meetings. So if that situation changed, we would put a communication up on our website. Let yourselves and the flexible route probationers know of any changes for this session.
Yeah.
And someone's also been asking about you know, teachers who might have to self-isolate, so that kind of links in with that as well.
I think really the way that you would deal with self-isolation in terms of TIS probationers, so again, if they're contracted and they're self-isolating, they're continuing to be able to offer either online support or doing activities from home. Those days can count. If they're self-isolating, it's different from sickness, but that's if the flexible route probationer is actually contracted in the school with you. Yeah. So I would imagine that would just fall into the same way it does for the TIS probationers. We are living in strange times, aren't we?
So sorry, just trying to go through the list here. Someone's asking what happens if someone is hired on a full-time basis but doesn't have a full-time timetable. Can they still qualify early?
Cecilia, do you want to?
So it's a good question. If they were employed for full time and their timetable wasn't full time, but they were making it up with professional learning, we could credit that as long as they were doing a 0.8 at least teaching. So there is that flexibility with that. If it was to go under the 0.8, or if they weren't doing professional learning for that sort of time out, they would need to then do the full 270.
So that 0.8 is really just almost a mirror image of the teacher induction scheme, really, isn't it? It would just be that same sort of to get that full year as you would for the teacher induction scheme probationer. It would need to be that 0.8.
Yeah. But they don't. They can do a full timetable as well. Yeah. So.
We've got a couple of people who just want to know how to find out. You know, who they should be contacting to find out the individual teachers who qualified outside of Scotland about what the days they have to complete are. You know, who would they get in touch with to find out that information?
So I've just popped up on the screen there. The best thing to do is to email us at pld@gtcs.org.uk, where, as I say, Cecilia, Rachel and myself all man that main email box. But actually the teachers themselves will have a note of how many days are expected of them. So they should be able to provide and share that information with you. But if you are in any doubt, then please do drop the PLD email box a message, and then we'll have a look for you. Also, it's worth saying that on the into teachings, that's in and then number 2 teaching.org.uk website, there's an area for the flexible route. So some of the paperwork that we've referred to in terms of the different profiles, the paper-based profiles, guidance on observations and all that, actually within that website as well, within Into Teaching, you can find lots of, it's a good source of information, you can find lots of information in there. But the rule of thumb is, if in doubt, drop us a line and we'll get back to you.
Yeah, we've just got a couple of questions just on the profiles and when people will be alerted about that. Some people are saying that their probationers still can't access their profiles, but I think you mentioned earlier that it should be this week.
Yes, absolutely. The welcome email is just being processed at the moment, so that should go out. I would imagine it's going to be tomorrow, or maybe what day are we on? Thursday, tomorrow or Thursday. Forgot what day of the week it was then. So yeah, the profiles are ready, but we need to obviously get a communication out to the flexible route probationers with TCS login information so that they can then access their profiles as well. And any challenges with getting online or anything like that, then we're always there to support at PLD as well. I should note on there, I've put Elaine's email. Elaine's a senior strategic manager for the early careers team, but you'll be able to get to myself, Cecilia and Rachel through the PLD email that's up there on the screen.
We do have a few more questions, but I'm conscious of time and people eager probably to get home as well. So what we'll do is we'll take a note of these and have them answered along with the recording and the slides from today. You can also get in touch with us either through those channels or at communications@gtcs.org.uk, just if there was something in particular that you wanted to ask, and we'll make sure that we get an answer back to you. But just if anybody's sitting there with their question unanswered, we'll include it in a sort of a little document along with the recording, which will be on that Into Teaching website.
Is it worth mentioning, Kirsty, on Thursday then, if you are supporting a probationer, a flexible route probationer, then on Thursday at 4 o'clock we have another webinar that will go through sort of more or less the same information with them and their requirements from their perspective on Thursday at 4 o'clock, and that will be ourselves again going through that. And then there's that date of the 29th of October for the webinar specifically about profiles.
Yeah, I'm just in the process of putting a registration link on the GTCS website. So if you go to the news page on the GTCS website and go down to featured events, it should be in there within the next couple of minutes, hopefully. And you can send that link to any of your probationers if they're looking for some additional support and information. Again, that session will also be recorded and made available on the Into Teaching website. I think that covers it. Like I say, it will be all of this will be made available on the Into Teaching website. If you would like a link sent to you, you can email me at communications@gtcs.org.uk, along with any feedback that you have, and again with any questions. But yeah, just thank you to everybody for attending.
Thank you,
Sarah and Cecilia, for presenting. Not sure if you have anything else to end on.
No, just that please know we're here to help, and drop us a line or give us a call through the main number. It's quite often easier to speak to somebody who you can put a face to a name. So if you get myself or Cecilia, and as I say, there's our colleague Rachel as well that helps out on the PLD line. So give us a call and we'll be pleased to help.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.